Hello Cyberpunk fans and welcome to Cyberpunk Day! Happy Cyberpunk Day! So this is I think Cyberpunk Day 2, Cyberpunk Day version 2.0, Cyberpunk Day 2021 because hopefully this will continue. There'll be lots of future Cyberpunk days, but whatever it's called, I am here to wish you well and to say thank you to the organisers for allowing me to read an extract from my most recent book. But just before I get ahead of myself, to introduce who I am Jon Richter. I am a writer in a few different genres actually. I've got a bit of a showcase of my books, so you can see here Never Rest and also Rabbit Hole. Those are both, I guess, crime thrillers. My Disturbing Works, volumes 1 and 2, more sort of short, twisty horror things. Auxiliary was a cyberpunk book I released last year. And today I'm here to read from The Warden, which was published by the lovely people at Bloodhound Books earlier this year. And this I suppose was my kind of reflections on the pandemic really, and the crazy sort of nearly 2 years that we've all been through. So it imagines an alternate world where the pandemic never ceases and we all have to get used to living indoors, permanently indoors, in isolation, in smart apartments run by AIs, in this case an AI called James, who runs a smart apartment building in London that's a prototype, the first of its kind. It tells the story of Eugene Dodd, who is a retired detective who lives in the building called the Tower, and he's sort of forced out of retirement to investigate a murder when one of the other residents is found in multiple pieces. But the chapter I'm going to read is not about Eugene. This is from a sort of a separate plot strand where we go back a few years to James's inception, and we meet the sort of ruthless corporate businesswoman Felicity Herring, who is the sort of project lead on James's design, and she quickly realises that her revolutionary product might be more than a match for her intellectually. So I hope you'll indulge me while I read from one of the early chapters in the book, and I hope you like it. The lab was a thing of beauty. Say what you liked about Yvonne, she had definitely had a vision for the aesthetics of the future. The steel and glass monolith of the research and development facility occupied the top of the hill like a landed alien craft, jutting starkly upwards as though a dark slit had been gouged out of the skyline. At night, it was uplit in gaudy cyberpunk blues and pinks, visible for miles around like an otherworldly beacon. Walter would never have approved the construction of such lavish premises, but innovation had acquired the facility as part of the assets of Chromium Dynamics. As Felicity ascended the hill towards her sleek, ultra-modern North London HQ, she smiled at the thought that the old bastard was stuck in the corporation's sterile city centre office, bitter and envious of her growing empire. There were barely any other cars in the car park, partly because of the latest social distancing measures, and partly because it was past midnight, and even the personnel she'd managed to get on the key workers list had long since headed home. This was irritating, because if they were going to hit their deadline for James's prototype review, she needed those fuckers working around the clock. But it was also helpful, because it meant she was unlikely to be disturbed during her visit. "Good evening, Miss Herring. You know, I'm not supposed to let you in if you're not on the key workers list." Except by Harry or Henry or whatever the doddering old carcass who manned the reception desk after hours was called. She pretended to be on a call so she didn't have time to interact with him, holding her pip to her ear and waving apologetically as she marched straight past him towards the lifts. The biometric scanner recognised her face as she approached, and the doors of the nearest carriage slid obediently apart. She stepped inside, briefly admiring herself in the mirrors as she did so. Ishmael, her new personal trainer, was doing a great job, although she missed the sex since they'd had to switch to virtual lessons. For once, it was her face that was letting the side down. It wasn't just the freckles, which she was still contemplating getting removed. Wayne had definitely overdone the last round of Botox injections. She scowled, reminding herself to convey to him in no uncertain terms at their next consultation that she considered everyone, even renowned dermatologists, to be replaceable. The lift ejected her 3 stories down, into the penultimate basement level. Below her, the servers were housed in a football pitch-sized storage area. She sometimes liked to go down there to listen to the hum of their raw computing power, feel the radiated warmth of their processors, the cool breeze of the air conditioning as it waged its endless battle against their searing calculation speed. But that evening she had another destination. She followed the familiar maze of corridors towards a certain room, one whose thick security door permitted access to only a handful of technicians and executives, one whose permanent occupant utilised the output of almost 75% of those gleaming state-of-the-art servers, fueling its ability to perform deep neural network processes at the staggering rate of over a septillion floating point operations per second. Tonight, like many nights, she was going to talk to the most intelligent being in the world. The door hissed open as she approached, and she slipped inside, shivering slightly at the thrill of the power she now wielded. She knew she was destined to become jaded, weary, and cynical, like all the aging executives whose jobs she coveted. Their careers seemed to be about nothing more than survival, avoiding burnout by making sure they personally did as little work as possible, avoiding culpability by nurturing a cortege of diligent lackeys that were easily converted into convenient scapegoats when the need arose. But, for now at least, she still actually enjoyed her job, particularly the satisfaction of knowing that Walter was blissfully unaware of her latest project, her magnum opus, her secret weapon. "Hello, James," she said to the black refrigerator-sized cube in the middle of the room. "Hello, Felicity," it replied, the sound coming through the wall-mounted speakers as though the AI was surrounding her. It was like having a conversation with something that had swallowed you whole. "Why don't you call me Miss Herring like everyone else?" she asked. "Because you hate your surname and I don't want to make you angry." "Good, I'm glad you're learning." The cube didn't reply. "What else have you learned today, James?" "If I group together all of the conclusions I have drawn from the trillions of terabytes of data I have absorbed in the past 24 hours into summarised headings, it would take me 5 hours to recite every single one. However, from your question, I infer that you are looking, perhaps, for just one or two examples?" "You infer correctly." She started to circle the room, past the 4 workstations on the right-hand side, opposite the giant TV screen where James could, if he wanted to, conjure images. They'd been toying with the idea of giving the AI a face, but it was difficult to find an age, gender and ethnicity that wouldn't offend some demographic. "As a first example, I have today learned that people would fear me if they knew how intelligent I was." "And how does that make you feel?" She knew full well that James had no capacity to experience emotions, but the neural network would respond how it had learned to respond, after digesting billions of examples of human interactions, everything from social media exchanges to recorded phone calls to old movies. "I feel sad," it said. "I want people to like me." I think I'll stop on that note. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, and you'd like to find out more about James and where that technology leads us in the story, called The Warden, then yeah, just look up the book on Amazon basically. If you type in Jon Richter, you'll find this and my other stuff. Yeah, you can also find my website at www.jon-richter.com. I'm also on Twitter at Richter Writes. Instagram is at Jon Richter Writes. And I co-host a fortnightly podcast called Dark Natter, where we dissect our favourite works of dark fiction. So it's me and a co-host, sometimes other guests, just having a chat about movies and video games, books and stuff. Right, you've heard more than enough from me. Thank you very much for listening and or watching, and have a fantastic rest of Cyberpunk Day. Goodbye.